when I think about the stories that really resonate with me, that I want to tell, that uplift me. And now that I have children, I want to create a space for them to feel comfortable in this world.
Today's episode is with an incredibly talented Indigenous film producer. Before making her name on the international scene, Chelsea Winstanley had won numerous awards here in Aotearoa. Now the world's spotlight is on her for her work in the critically acclaimed movie Jojo Rabbit, earning her an Academy Award nomination for Best Producer. Ladies and gentlemen, Chelsea Winstanley, Indigenous 100. Chelsea Winstanley, tēnā koe. Thank you very much for being a part of Indigenous 100. Nau mai.
Kia ora.
No hea koe?
No tauranga moana hau.
Ngāti Rangi?
Ai, Ngāti Rangi me Ngāti Ranginui o ko iwi. Ko piri rākau te hapu, ko paparoa te marae.
Tēnā. Toko hi o Tāmaki?
Toko toru.
Huai o rātou ingoa?
Oh my gosh, ko Maia, ko rātou ko Te Kaingoti Hine Kāhu, ko Matiwa.
Ara mai. Tēnā koe. Me ngā mihi ki tō whānau. Hey, look, thanks so much for being a part of Indigenous 100. It is awesome. Are you here now? Like in Aotearoa, Hareake?
I escaped. I escaped LA. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, the reason why I escaped really was because I was focusing on something that I could come home to do. Yeah. In 2018, I heard about this incredible exhibition that was taking place at the Auckland Art Gallery. And we'd come home to premiere Merata's film at the New Zealand International Film Festival. So I went and had a catch up with Nigel Burrell, who's the Māori curator there, and he told me about this incredible exhibition that was happening, going to be opening in 2021, 2022, wasn't exactly sure. And I said, tell me more, what's it all about? And he said it's going to be the largest single survey of contemporary Māori art that this art gallery has ever put their effort or, backed. So for the first time in their 135-year history, the Auckland Art Gallery are giving Māori precedent like they've never ever had before. Wow. And I just was like, and a Māori is curating it. Oh my God, wow, we have to follow this, what's going on? I was just so fascinated, like tell me more, how do you even put this on? This sounds so crazy, like how do you even get that agency in the first place? That's full on Māori control of the narrative, because so often that story of contemporary art has been from the Western art canon to mesh. Yeah. So we've often been left out of that conversation. So you've either had to be studied at Elam or whatnot, or something to be considered to be part of what is contemporary art. So I just love the fact that Māori are going to have control of this story. Yeah. I mean, it's been 20 years since Ngāhi Raka Mason did Purangi Aho, which was the largest kind of survey before this. So if you think about the impact of Te Māori and how beautiful that was, and for Māori to just own that story, this is kind of almost going to be on that same wavelength. So I was just excited to go, oh, I'm going to park that. That was 2018. And then when, shit goes down, you're like, what am I going to do? Where do I want to focus? Where do I want to be? What do I want to say? What do I want my contribution to be? And everything pivots home for me. So I was like, I'm going to pick this story back up and see where it goes. And
I find it fascinating because a lot of Māori, particularly who are in film, television, media, content development, that kind of thing, like LA's the place they want to be. You're going the other way.
I know. Well, I mean, yes, you can aspire to go down that route. Yeah. You can think that Hollywood is all it's meant to be. And you can experience that absolutely for sure. It's there for you if you want it. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, you have to do the why that makes you cry. Yeah. And the why that makes me cry is always home. When I think about the stories that really resonate with me, that I want to tell, that uplift me. And now that I have children, I want to create a space for them to feel comfortable in this world. And I think that means coming home, do the mahi, as Willie Wider would say, do the mahi, get the treats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is that the normal process you undertake to think about ideas, to move those ideas into a process that then becomes a form of content at the end of it? Is it simply by there's a phrase called, fluke of nature, serendipity of longitude, it just happens and comes together?
I think there has to be like a bit of a fire in the belly or a kākano somewhere that you just it gets embedded in your system and you can't let it go. Yeah. For me, if a story resonates with me, then it just sits there and I have to marinate it on a little bit and I get excited. If something excites me and I can see that there is an opportunity for us to celebrate ourselves, because I'm all about celebrating. Yeah. I don't want to make the stories that are necessarily going to be, Emma Espinard talked about it recently in terms of there being the exception. You're either the Māori exception or you're the pōhara, you're either one or the other, Like, where's the yummy celebration in between? We don't always have to be one or the other. And so I think it's really important for us to celebrate all spectrum. We're across the whole board. So, yeah, for me, I'm just like, that sat with me since 2018. I was like, I know there's something there, I know there's something there. And often when you're producing something or trying to get anything off the ground, there's no money in that. We don't have a lot of money in development. So if you're going to put your time and effort into something, you really want to believe in it. Yeah. That's kind of how I operate. And I always think about perhaps a legacy type of thing too that you're doing with any project, because this particular exhibition, we're not only going to be celebrating this exhibition as is, but it's tracing art from the 50s till now. So you imagine all the history that goes with that we haven't necessarily had before in a visual format, and we get to talk about it and celebrate it more. So I'm all about things that will have a life beyond just the here and now.
How do you protect, maybe if that's the right way of putting it, the legacy of those who are responsible for that art in the first place? How do you ensure that those legends of Māori art are respected, their legacies retained, their whānau are given due respect? What process do you go through to be able to do that? Yeah. Is it the same as what you do in other forms of content, so that stories are protected and respected?
So. I think just naturally as Māori we have a different approach to the way in which we make things. There's a respect first and foremost, and you don't just rock up there thinking that turn my cameras on and away we go. No, there's a lot of pati going on, and you have to, and I think that just comes with a part of manaaki, and you have to take a kai and go and sit down with someone for a while and talk to them, let them know about you first. Why should someone trust me? They don't have to trust me. I have to prove to them that my integrity is intact and that I respect you enough that I will do my utmost to showcase you in the light that you deserve to be, kind of thing. So for me, it's time, and it takes that time for people to give you the information that they're happy to give. And that comes with, I think, just being Māori anyway, right? Like your nannies or your uncles, aunties, they're not just going to give you that info you want. You have to work your way, not really to prove that you're worthy, because that can sometimes work against you, like you're constantly trying to, hey, I'm here, trying to prove myself. It's just a respect to show that you're in it for the long haul, And
is it a case of time, engage, space?
Yeah.
Leave the space, come back, time, engage, space, leave it again.
Yep.
And if so, do you have a cut-off point, or is it just, it is what it is, it happens when it happens?
It's funny, actually, I have had a little incident recently where there was a project I was kind of tracking, and then it kind of fell into the, not too hard basket, but the whānau, there was something there that wasn't quite right, and I had to sit back and think, hang on a minute, did I not do the due process properly? Maybe I didn't. And then therefore, I take full responsibility, and I'm not going to fight for that, because kei a koutou, that's totally your call, and I'm not going to try and pester you or bug you for it. It's obviously not my place, and that comes with age, I think, too. I'm just like, I'm not going to fight for that no more. And I think that's just a part of growing up too, Is it
different now than it was before?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you're kind of young and hungry for it, you're just probably making mistakes left, right and centre, You're just going for it, and you're probably not cognizant of maybe the mistakes you might be making. And that's awesome. Get the slap down. You need to have that too, because that just makes you a better person in the long run anyway. So, yep, definitely it's easier as you get older. But that just comes with confidence, I think.
Is it... I found this is interesting, because I found the same thing when you're dealing with news and you're trying to protect people's stories, and because it's a quicker turnaround, right? It's harder to be able to do that to a certain degree. And a lot of Pākehā journos would say, I feel sorry for you. You've got to deal with all the Broadcasting Standards Authority stuff. You've got to get a story out at the end of the day, and then you've got to go back to the marae and face up when you get it wrong. But I found that quite empowering. In fact, I found the process of transparency and accountability actually more kind of empowering, more kind of motivating than not having that in place, right? Yeah. Do you find the same thing, or is it slightly different when you're dealing with a longer format?
No, I think it's kind of the same as well. And I think, it can be really hard. Actually, you have to wear all those other hats, and you have to be responsible for all these other emotions. And so sometimes, you do hear, oh man, it's hard being Māori. You're like, oh my God, I've got to get this here, this, the right way to do this, and then am I allowed to do that yet? I'll make sure I go back to the marae, enough of this and that. And you do sometimes look at your Pākehā counterparts and think, far out, I'd like to just hang out on the couch now on a Friday night and just have a wine or whatever, but hang on, there's a wānanga at home or something I better get to, and oh my goodness, and who have I pissed off this week? Or, so there's so much management. But at the end of the day, man, I wouldn't want it any other way. How I often just think I'm so grateful that I have this whakapapa and I have a lineage through my mum. And because everything I think about and I want to do and create and empower women, especially wahine Māori, comes from that direct connection through my mum, through my nan. And I just think, people talk about intergenerational trauma and the motivators as to why you want to do things. And I often always it's like my nan is my benchmark of am I on the right track? Or, do a little prayer, and if there's a little tohu that comes up or whatever.
Seriously?
Honestly, when I was in LA and I was just, it can be a hard place, but there would be times, and because I felt so far away from home, we had this house in Studio City, so you could kind of look over this valley area, and it was nice. You could see some green stuff, because often it's just a concrete jungle there. And I just remember a few times I would just sit there and I'd just be close my eyes, and I'd just be please, just give me a sign. And I would either be Nan, say something to me, or Merata. It's either of these two. And there would be a kahu, and I'm not even kidding. There would be a kahu that would just fly, and I'd be sweet, okay, cool. I'm on the right track. Yeah. Yeah. Because I just think when you do have that distance, you need something, and that would be my anchor for me. That would be my mark. Yeah.
Talk to me about your nan and your mum. What are the influences aside from tohu? What are the influences that they have inculcated with you that you exhibit potentially, that you enact when you're doing what you're doing in your everyday life, when you're doing what you're doing in your work life?
Yeah. Well, when I think about my mum, so she came from a generation that didn't learn te reo Māori or have te reo Māori taught to her, because her mum was whacked and slapped at school and had it beaten out of her, I guess you could say. But I kind of learned about who I was, and I learned about the resilience and the strength. So when I think about my nan, I think about that and what she had to go through, holy, going to school and being told many things. Your language is not welcome here, your culture is not welcome here. I was talking to my auntie the other day, and she said Nan would hide if there were Pākehā that would come and tap on the door or something. She would hide out of fear, because she thought she was too Māori, too brown or something. It was just, even just having that, but then still surviving and living as a woman. She had 11 kids. I just think her resilience was so amazing that she was, and so everything I kind of think about, and she's just my hero. I just think for everything she ever did and went through, and I often think, I wonder what she would have wanted to do had she had the opportunities or choices. Apparently she wanted to be in the Air Force. Well, that was probably never going to happen for this little girl from Te Puna. She was probably never going to get that chance. And then here she is with 11 babies, raising them pretty much on her own most of the time, because my grandfather was out doing whatever he was doing mahi-wise. You got to provide for the whānau. And so here's my nan. I just think she's such just the most incredible woman that she's still, she's not around anymore, but that she survived all that stuff, And then I just heard this lovely story. She told me I made a documentary about her, because as you do, you're just I want to make a film about you. Yeah. So, and it was actually about Māori women and smoking. So it wasn't the most positive thing, but she ended up giving up smoking because of the documentary, she said. And she made me put this little disclaimer at the end. She was like, you got to put something in there that I actually gave up geez, you know, don't make it look like I'm still smoking. And she's in her 80s, you know, so I was like, yep, sweet as nan. But she told me this beautiful story about, even though she had her reo whacked out of her, she had this beautiful relationship with her own nan, Hoki Murray, and she would, her nan would sit there. She described this beautiful story. She'd have her little pipe and have her tobacco in her pipe. And my nan would have to read to her nan the Pākehā newspaper, but read it in Te Reo Māori. So that's how she was able to keep up her Reo Māori. And I thought, far out, what a beautiful relationship to have with your nan. But what a crazy way to have it in terms of that, the language being the thing that you have to have that connection with. Because her nan never spoke English, so she had to communicate with her that way. And I just love that. And then so following on from that, I look at my own mum, and I was like, oh man, growing up in a household of 11 would have been crazy, eh? Like, who's going to get the attention today? Probably no one. You're fighting for all your kai. Like, there'd be like crates of milk delivered every day, crates of bread. It was that huge of a whānau. You know, and so my poor mum, you know, she, and amongst all these kids, and then she's doing pretty well at school, but then, hey, she gets hapu at like 16, and, you know, and she kind of had her sights set on a career at the bank or something like this, you know. And so I often think about my mum and my nan and them not having the opportunities, because as her life turned out, my mum's hapu and she's getting married, and then hello, 4 kids later, I come along at 23. But so here's my mum, a young woman who probably had dreams and aspirations, and there she is with, you know, 4 babies at 23. Yeah. So, but then here I am, almost kind of repeating that. So I had a baby at 20.
That's right. I was going to say your oldest would be 20 something.
23 now.
Yeah, I was going to say 18 because you're only 37. But yeah, so how is it then? Well, okay. So to start to backtrack a little bit, why film? Why film production? Why move there?
Yeah, there was something I think just hit me inside about the power of visual storytelling, and it was. I mean, I had my son. I mean, I always loved photography. So at school, I always loved the arts, and I went to Auckland Girls Grammar, but they didn't have a very strong arts kind of program. So I ended up going to Western Springs for my last year, just because I had heard that they had good art, like photography and art and design and stuff like that. So I just made a conscious decision. It was hard because I was leaving all my girl mates, and I'd come up from the mount. Like, you know, initially when I left, I was like, the chick who turned up with the long kind of surfy hair and the skirt down to my ankle and the Roman sandals. I was so out of place. And all these like fancy like
would have gone down
chicks.
Well at Auckland Girls.
Oh my God, they got like pencil skirts and hems over their knees and just like, oh, the latest hairdos. I was like, oh. But luckily, I don't know why, these group of beautiful women who I'm still friends with today, they kind of took me under their wing, and you know, I had a beautiful like 4 years of high school there, met incredible people. You know, coming from the Mount, I feel so ashamed and naive of the fact that it was, because it was pretty much Māori Pākehā in the Mount. And then you come up to Auckland, I didn't even know these beautiful little islands like Tokelau and Niue like existed. Shame, like I was going to like the Polyfest and all this kind of stuff, like, wow, this is amazing. And so having that just really opened my eyes, and you know, that's part of storytelling too, right? Culture and everything like that. So I was always drawn to the arts and photography, so visual storytelling. And then I think what really hit it for me was when I saw Bastion Point Day 507, and I was like, whoa, wow, that is storytelling. I mean, it still makes me choke up and cry today, just seeing those beautiful people on their whenua being unjustly ripped away for nothing, you know, for peacefully standing there. This is our right to be in this place. And I just couldn't understand, how could we be Aotearoa, New Zealand, existing like that? Seeing those images of the tanks rolling down and up to Takaparawa, just like, what is going on? And I think those images just sat with me, and then I was like, who made that? Yeah. And so knowing at that point, there was a Māori woman who was a mother of 5 at the time, but you know, solo mum, just doing it hard, you know, just under the radar as she was, but so fierce. And it just made me want to I think documentary, for me, at that point, I was just like, I want to tell stories that deal with injustice and deal with trying to be part of the movement for change, I think. But it just hit me hard. It's like,
so there's some irony in the sense that this is what you follow and this is what you do, but given what you've just told us about your grandmother and your mother, they had children fairly young, and 20's still fairly youngish, right? Why the difference? Why then were you still able to pursue that aspiration when you talked about your grandmother wanting to be in the Air Force, you talked about the mother and all that kind of, why the difference? Why do you think you were still able to follow that and progress that career choice forward, vis-a-vis your mother and your grandmother?
well, I've been on a personal level, I think, because I just, maybe, you know, when I look at her and I look at my mum and just think, man, had they had the opportunity? So I kind of saw myself in a different space and time.
Yeah.
And here I am, yes, I'm a solo parent on the DPB, but there are opportunities out there for me. And also, I would look at my son and think, I want you to have a good life. I want you to have a better life. I want us to have a better life. Like, we can do better, kind of thing. But in a wider context, I suppose, like, it's timing, you know, like, my grandmother didn't have that opportunity, neither did my mum. Those things weren't available to them. So I kind of feel like I better do something to be part of that movement, to make sure my daughters, now I have 2 daughters, and I can carry on, and like there won't be as much struggle as I had. And I can't say I've had a lot of struggle. I feel very fortunate to be where I am today, because I know all those women that have come before me, and men like yourselves, all the wonderful people within Māori media have been chipping away at these walls of either it's patriarchy or colonisation, whatever it is, to make those little cracks and the lights coming through. And I feel like timing. I'm at this point right now, part of the movement. We don't have equality for sure, but I'm going to keep chipping away too. And I just feel like that's what we should all be continuing to do, and not give up on that, because they didn't sacrifice for nothing, you know. And Merata was always about building capacity. And I think about her own, what she kind of gave up, because phenomenal filmmaker, phenomenal storyteller, but she saw the need and capacity, because she's like, we're not going to get anywhere if I don't step back and now pull people up with me. And man, I have so much respect for her, because that's what she did. Yeah. She did for so many of us. Don Selwyn, Barry Barclay, they were all pulling us up. But they then, in a way, gave up their own love of the craft. Because Merata, I remember just before she passed, she was, I'm going to be making films in my 80s. And I was like, yes, you are, Queen, you know, and you should be. Yeah. But unfortunately, she left us way too early. But she was also, you know, you think about it, and often as a producer, you're always kind of having to support other, you know, other people's aspirations, if you like, and other people's films or whatever it might be. So you tend to let your own craft kind of sit by the wayside for a while. And I often wonder about her and think, wow, what would she be making now if she could, you know?
If she had more time, yeah, you're right, the sense of, you know, they were mentoring a lot of people like yourself and many others. I remember the first time I met Don and Barry, and actually Merata, when Don, I think, was doing Merchant of Venice.
Oh, wow.
And
what a visionary, like.
Oh yeah. What? He was doing it to Mahuru and Marae before the Mahuru and Marae had the concrete floor, you know, the flash floor, the flash building that it has now. But I remember, you know, I was reporting at the time and I was fairly average, and I think that's generally accepted. But I remember feeling...
You're never average.
I'm feeling a sense of... I've never been so nervous, because, you know, it's a bit like, I imagine it would be a bit like, you know, if you're a young rugby player and you see Jonah, you know, or something like that. It's kind of like how I felt. And not feeling worthy and all that kind of stuff, and just the immense amount of trepidation internally I had, where you can barely utter a word, and meeting these kind of pantheons and institutions of Māori film and Māori media. How did that come about for you? How were you able to engage, work with, meet Merata? What happened?
Well, I had kind of met her through her films, right? And I was just like, wow, man, imagine ever meeting that woman. Like, never, ever thought I would, or even have the opportunity to work with her. So I have to thank Tainui Stevens for, so while I was studying at AUT doing my Bachelor of Communications, he was the only Māori that gave us a lecture, and it was about Māori representation in the media. And it's probably the only lecture I remember, actually. Wow. Like, because you want to hear the stuff that resonates with you. You know, you want to give me more of that. And I was just like transfixed by what he was telling us and talking to us about. And I just remember straight afterwards, I just had this pull to. I just needed to talk to him. I just needed to say, "Hey, I'm here. I need to talk to you more." Or, you know, he was the only person who was giving me something that I was really interested in. And so I just introduced myself to him and I said, hey, I'm really interested in this space. And I think he could probably tell I was like, oh, you poor lonely thing. Like,
there's not many of you around.
Like, give her something. And then one of my assignments at school was like I wanted to talk about the representation of Māori within the media, and often it was always, you know, the criminals on the news and stuff like that. So he was so generous, and he said, yes, of course, I'll help, and, you know, I made a little mini doco as an assignment at school. And then he said, come to this WIFT event. I want you to meet some other Māori women. Because I just felt so alone. I didn't know what was out there for me or who was in the industry. I was too afraid to go to these events by myself. I didn't know, I wasn't part of that world yet, you know. So I have to thank him for kind of, you know, come, and uffing me. And that's where I met Libby Hakaraia and Rhonda Kite. And so I was in my last year at university, and you got to make your kind of, you know, your end of year film, your project. And I actually have to thank my marae, because they allowed me to make my first ever film, which I won a Media Peace Award for, actually. But if it wasn't for them believing in me and giving me the opportunity to come home and make a little film on our marae, then I probably wouldn't have had that drive or support or nurture that I always feel like I have. Like I always feel now they've got my back, you know. So
this is your marae in Te Puna.
Yeah, so Paparo marae. So I wanted to my cousins. I was just so in awe of my cousins. There were 3 cousins in particular, Shannon, Koro and Tiria. They were studying full-time at Waikato University, but also coming home, like studying full-time, then coming home, running this marae tourism venture for international students, like young kids who were coming over from the States and whatnot. And I was just blown away by their commitments to their reo, their tikanga, their marae, their hapu. And I was just like, man, I want to make something about you 3. And just having that generosity, you know, of course you got to get through the aunties, like, Auntie Hoko was like, tell me a little bit more, you know. So Hoki was like, and I knew that once I got Hoki's blessing, then I was kind of in. And so I just wanted to celebrate them. And I think that gave me my start in wanting to celebrate Te Ao Māori and what we do as a community and how we love one another, you know, we really do, we nurture. When I think about my nan or whatever, I just think about Kai and like, oh, she was so into her garden, and if you had a birthday, she'd make you like, not just a cake like this, she'd make you an oven tray, like it would be like this. But imagine how many moko she had. She had 11 of her own kids. She's probably baking like every day of the week. Yeah. But just like knowing that, so I have always wanted to tell things that celebrated us. So I made this little film, and then because I'd met Rhonda and Libby at this event, and I kind of had started to feel a little bit, you know, nurtured. And actually Ella Henry had her baby was going to the same kohanga as my son. So there was some kind of connection there too, and I didn't know the gravitas or the enormity of Ella at the time either. So I was slowly starting to, you know, meet these amazing women, and then with my final film, I was like, okay, stuff it, I'm just gonna like send it to Libby and Rhonda and see what happens with my CV, and I'm just fresh out of like uni and see what happens. And it wasn't until later, like Libby said to me, what we really loved about your film was there was a bit of humour in there. Yeah. So some of my cousins, they would just, in order to engage these other, you know, young kids from overseas, they'd make it fun and they'd make the culture inviting. And so I think I just naturally wanted to tell stories that had a little bit of both, bit of drama, bit of humour, but if that's who we are though, right? Like just naturally. And so they gave me a job. So that's how I got into this whole industry, that these 2 women gave me a chance. And I think that's what I always think about too. Like, I really am so very thankful. So having that job And that was when Māori television was kind of starting too. So everyone had we were all making content left, right and centre because they needed it. It could be real rubbish sometimes, but it could be great too. And it was groundbreaking because we were doing all that Aotearoa stuff and following artists that had never had profiles. But it was so neat because you could and going out into the community and meeting people. And so I started directing there, which was great because that's what I'd always wanted to do anyway. And then Libby gets hapu and off she goes, and then all of a sudden we're going to producer at the company. So I've just naturally become a producer at that point. But while I was there, one day the almighty Merata turned up. And it was just one of those classic situations where you're like, I'm at the photocopy machine or the fax machine, just like trying to and then just like meeting your hero. It's like, wow. So thankfully it was like right timing, right timing. I got to meet her. They were at the time discussing the feature film Cousins, which Briar and now Ainsley have gone on to make. So they were kind of massaging that script, and I got to meet her at that point. Lo and behold, because of course, if you're the young junior, you're making cups of tea and you're getting biscuits and stuff out and making sure everyone's all right. And then I look outside and there's this like dude in a long hackery leather jacket and he's smoking hardcore, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. She like just looks after homeless people as well. I was like, well, let's go see if that fella wants a cup of tea. And I go down and I was like, oh, it's Jeff Murphy.
Oh, Jeff Murphy.
He had the free jacket, from Mick Jagger jacket on. I was like, oh, shame. But anyway, it was like, oh, from one hero to another. And then I didn't really connect with her again until we started kind of talking more and more. We helped Tammy Davis make his short film, Ebony Society. And she was starting to kind of instill in me this take control. Like, Tammy wasn't going to be the director at that stage, but she encouraged him to push hard, push back. You should be directing. And then she was like, to me, and you're going to produce alongside Ainsley. I was like, okay. Do we have money? She's like, no, but we'll get it. I was like, okay, cool. It was just like nothing was, for her, nothing should stop you ever, no matter what it was. I remember her saying something about contracts. She was like, they're only there just to be changed. I was like, oh, okay, they're not binding. She was like, no. I was like, okay, cool. She's just so wise and just, I think if you need that wise Yoda kind of figure if you're, starting out.
How much do you pick up via, that kind of communication, the kind of informed, wise kind of counsel, and how much do you pick up by osmosis? Just by kind of sitting there and being with her? Yeah,
both, I think. It's a lot of filmmaking is observation too. Storytelling, story gathering, is how do you get the best information? You just shut your mouth and just watch and, you just observe. So both, a bit of both. And then being brave and honest about what you don't know too, and seeking wise counsel.
And how hard is that? Or was the relationship so trustworthy that you could have that in the field?
She freaked me out. Like, oh my God.
So how were you able to do that though? Because, this is something that, people say this holds us back a lot, but how were you able to kind of pluck up the gumption to be able to do it? Because it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I think I remember when we were editing Saving Grace and we'd taken it back to her whare in the Coromandel. And I think I just broke down one day crying because I was like, oh my God, I'm either not doing the right thing, or because she was hard, And if you're not going to do what she's expecting of you, she'll let you know. I think I remember just like going out to the lawn and ringing Mum. I was like, Mum, this is so hard. But because she was teaching me, she was just like, she gives you little snippets of information or whatever, and then she'd go away and just like the little sprinkling of the dust and then come back and she'd always question you, and then she'd be, but she was genuinely interested in what you were up to and where you were planning on going. And so when we did on the set of Boy, because she was a producer on that, so she was coming down, and then she started kind of saying to me, she wanted to make something to talk about child abuse within the Māori community, because it was drawing her back home. That particular story was drawing her back home, and she said to me at that time, I want you to produce it. So it's not something you say no to. Yeah. Of course, I was like, wow, I would be honoured. And I felt like she She was saying that because, again, building capacity. So, you know, I don't think you take that lightly, especially from someone like her, you know. So that was an amazing opportunity and a very hard experience too. And I think I grew up a lot and I made a bunch of mistakes too, because she passed the day we came in to give a rough cut to Māori television. And it was horrible for everybody. Of course, most of all her whānau, you know, and for everyone in the industry, of course, we lost an absolute legend and the grandmother of Indigenous cinema way too early. And I didn't at the time, I think this was my biggest lesson I probably learnt from that. I didn't have the time, at the time, I did not have the guts and I didn't have the strength to stand up to the funders and say we shouldn't finish this film. I won't say I felt, well, I guess I did feel a bit pressured because they were expecting this film to be done and they were like, you know, you should finish it and you should deliver it. But in hindsight, I would, and now I would say no, because that was her story, that was her vision. And then after working with Hepi and making that beautiful film about her, there were films that she never finished because there was a reason why they should not have been finished. Yeah. And so I learnt that, you know, if there's a reason why things need to be maybe on pause. Yeah. We don't always have to finish something. It's a conversation to begin, and maybe we need to do some more work around that because there isn't one solution for that issue either, you know. So I learnt a big lesson. I learnt how to maybe stand up for myself and really be in tune with my puku and my gut, and it's like, what is that telling me? I wouldn't do that now. Like I have enough strength now because I've learnt enough and whatever, I have made a few more mistakes, that I would stand up for what I know would be right. And I'd be able to articulate why, but I didn't know at the time. I just thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah. How important was it to get that story with Hepi right? Because it's not an easy thing to do, to tell the story of your hero.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're working with the whānau. And it's a huge responsibility for you to bear.
Massive, but I think it was an honour more than anything because I just remember getting a phone call from Cliff and he was like, hey, what are you up to? This is when we were in Wellington and we just finished What We Do in the Shadows, filming that film. And
but it wasn't released yet, was it? Or had just...
No.
Yeah.
Oh, the Shadows film?
Shadows, yeah.
No, it hadn't. Yeah. We'd just literally finished filming and I had a brand new baby as well. And so they were like, what are you up to? I was like, oh, I'm kind of resting actually. Just like, you know, finish this film with this baby. And it's like, wow, we were still in the editing kind of process. And he was like, oh, can you come and have a coffee? Come and have a coffee with me and Hepi. I was like, okay. So I met them for a coffee. And just classic awesome Cliff. So we're doing this film and want you to produce. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. What's it about? It was like, blah, 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 laid it on the table. You know, it's better to... He was starting his production company then, Cliff was, and he said, I want this to be the first film, I want Hepi to direct it, and we want you to produce it. And I was like, wow, okay. And I think I'd had enough time from the Saving Grace experience up until then to just settle with that, because I had felt a lot of guilt for kind of finishing it when I felt like I shouldn't have, you know. So I had enough time to process that feeling. And then I felt like, well, this was an opportunity to support her son, support the story that they want to tell, and so that's the role I'm going to play. I'm going to play that role, and I will support you, Hepi, to make the film you want to make. And we never put any pressure on him. We said, this film will take as long as it needs to take. I remember having one of our first hui was with me and Te Arapa and Hepi. I was looking at a photo the other day, and he looks like a baby. He's like so young, but you know, not that young, but still we all just looked like babies when we started this project. And we said to him at that point, we're not going to rush you, not just because it was the first project he had done as a filmmaker, but because this is about your whānau and this is about your journey, and it's going to take many different forms, but we are never going to put you in a compromising position with a deadline. You have to deliver by this, da-da-da, and we'll just be there with you and go through the motions. And it took 5 years.
How, you talk about the feeling in the puku. how does that transition to, I'm going to do it and I know I can do it?
Far out. I think there's always...
Because it would be similar for other productions, right? Not just what we do in the Shadows or Jojo Rabbit or anything else.
Yeah.
It must be the same kind of feeling. How does that transition to, got it, going to do it, we'll be fine?
Yep. I don't know if you ever feel like you're going to be fine until you deliver it, you know? I think you're always like constantly like, shit, have I made the right decision? Am I doing it the right way? I think there's always trepidation because you're not sure, because you're always constantly learning.
Yeah.
To be fair, like every story is different. So you can apply some of the same tools, but sometimes you can't. So you're constantly kind of reinventing the way to do things. And then the older you get, that you bring those tools with you. So yeah, I don't know. It's always.
Is there always a running onto the lawn ringing mum moment or not?
No, I think that was just because I was like in my hero's house going far out. No, not so much now because I've done a few films.
Yeah.
I got a few films under my belt, but I think the feeling of, if you always go back to your intention, I always think about intention, and if your intention is right, and you're always coming from it at a good place, and your intention is always positive and uplifting, or whatever your kind of goal is, I suppose. If you always stay on that track, just always come back to what is your intention, I think you'll naturally be guided in the right way. So you might kind of sway every now and again, but I just come back to your intention. Why is it that you want to tell the story, or why is it that you want to talk to that particular person, and just check in all the time, with yourself. And I think if you just do that, it's fine.
Is the kind of moment where you know you've got it right, actually let me put it this way, is the moment you know you've got it right when you receive the products like the WIFT Award, Women of Influence Award, and not something like an Academy Award nomination? Because these are your peers. These are the ones who help you get the start, right?
Yep.
And maybe it's not about awards at all.
Well, no, to be really honest, I think if I'm going to be super honest with my own self and my journey in life, I've always, I have looked for some kind of recognition, because I think that just naturally, am I on the right path? And sometimes I think as a young person, you don't know that you can find that inner strength. Yeah. So we're constantly trying to be validated. Then the older we get, you're kind of like, oh man, I don't need you to validate me anymore. Just because I'm tired of looking for outside validation. Yeah. I think I'm just going to find it within myself.
But that was important for you at some stage, as you were progressing through. Not so much now, but it was something that you looked for. Totally.
And also in terms of brutally honest, my name, Chelsea Winstanley, is so Pākehā. Like, look at me, I'm Ma'az.
Well, do you think Julian Wilcox sounds more Māori?
So I don't, Kauriawa te Puaki te reo Māori. And same with mātauranga, tikanga Māori. I didn't necessarily grow up in that, but because I've always had this lineage, or I know that I whakapapa, and I didn't really know anyone on my Pākehā side of my family, like both my grandparents died before I was even born, all that kind of stuff. I didn't know really them. I only knew this Māori world, to be fair, and it was just love and everything that just made me happy, and whānau, and just like yum. So in my mind, like Māori was everything. Yeah. So I was always fighting that to get validation, because I'm not dark, my name, Chelsea Winstanley, what the hell, so British. Like everything, all that stuff. So in my early career, I'd constantly be like, am I accepted now? Am I Māori enough, And the older I've gotten, I've been able to let that go a bit more, because, hey, you know what? I might not be good enough for you, and I might be too much for you, but I'm enough for me. Yeah. And I've got to that point now. I'm enough for myself.
I feel the same way. I always felt like a little bit like I was a bit behind the eight ball, particularly when you're learning the language, and everyone wants to be a wharehuia Māori, right? But and you're never going to get there. And it took a while to figure out you're never going to get there. But but I understand what you mean. There'll be many that'll be watching and listening to this, going, "Oh, but that's me." But that's me. So at what stage do you get to the point where you say, "Actually, I'm comfortable now in my own skin. I'm all good"?
Yeah.
How did you know? what was it? What was the tohu that said, yeah, I'm okay?
Yeah, I think probably many things along the way, and then just remember that happened, remember this, put that in your kete and just hold on to that. Making more and connection with home. Like now I just have this yearning to be home so much. But that probably just comes with age, about being confident as well. And then also, you know, just acknowledging that, yes, I do have Māori whakapapa. That can't be taken away from me. So no matter how much I feel like people think I'm not enough or whatever, or for some Pākehā I'm too much, God, I wish she'd shut her mouth, like, that kind of thing, like, oh, she stopped going on about it. This whole story sovereignty thing, whatever. But I'll always be about it. That's just me. And so I don't know if there was one defining moment or not. Maybe it was people like Merata, you know, tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey, come. I see you. And other people that have kind of just in their own little way, Tainui, I see you, you know, and that's all you need sometimes, just that little bit of encouragement, especially from actually elders. I think that means a lot, you know, because you do, as much as they're not going to give you that information off the bat, they'll give it to you eventually if they believe in you and your intention. So I think when you get that type of validation from Pākehā and your kuia and karaua, then I think that just fills you up inside, you know. So not one particular defining moment where I was like, you know what, I mean, yes, with age, you know, the whole thing, life begins at 40, whatever. Or just as older you get, the less you care about what people think. I mean, I've had my kids, so I'm not, you know, going, like, there's all these little things, little milestones you achieve, and you're like, I'm done with that now. Now I'm in this phase of my life. And you think about your own mortality too. You're like, well, I might only have this much time now, so what's really important to me? I think COVID was interesting for that very, you know, point. People just had to pause. You had to pause and go, what is actually more important to me right now?
That's an interesting point about mortality. And given, you know, with Merata and all the untold stories, right? Yeah. So do you now have to start thinking about the next plan is this? So start charting, actually the next project's going to look like this. Have you already started doing that now?
I have actually, but
really?
like, and even being home, so being in LA is like full of amazing, interesting people, and you're constantly, it's a transient place, so people are coming and going, you know, all the time.
Sounds a lot like Kaikohe.
Moerewa. Te Puna, the centre of the universe. But you're always interesting people having incredible conversations. It's a real like, wow. So the projects I was actually involved in there weren't even specifically set in America, and I think. Like, we were meant to shoot a Persian film in Canada, another Persian-based Iranian film in Scotland and Malta, like, and then COVID happened and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So my interests have always been kind of, you know, on the outside anyway, and the fringes and other things that kind of, you know, interest me about other cultures and stuff. So it didn't really matter to me that I was coming home to, I felt like I was coming home to glory more than anything. Like I wasn't actually leaving anything amazing behind. I was actually coming home to where I was always meant to be and to what I really want to be doing. This is where it's at for me, to be honest. And because I have two young daughters, my son's 23 now, but my two young girls who have had like a few formative years in America, and to be honest, if they call me mom one more time.
Is that what happens? Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
They kind of just, but I guess that's natural. I mean, Tīneka.
Understandable, yeah.
Tīneka went to kohanga and she did her beautiful, 5 years and graduated and all that, and then we went to the States. And there's, you just, once you don't have that in your whare or in your daily life, going to kura, and then all of a sudden she's plonked into this environment where she became embarrassed. I think this is the thing that really threw us. She became embarrassed of her name and herself, because her whole name was Te Kaingoti Hinekahu, and this was given to her by her koro. Kia ora koro, very long. But, so she was starting school and interacting with teachers and other kids, And, you know, as kids do, what's your name? She was too embarrassed to say her name because the reaction would be, what? Or, oh, I can't say that, that's too hard. And they would just naturally shorten her name to TK. So she got to the point where she wouldn't even say her name. And now how crazy is that to go from kohanga reo, where your name is, that is your mana, that is everything, it has so much weight and, you know, you come with so much pride with that, to being confronted with this, oh, I'm sorry, what? Oh, too hard. Oh, we'll just call you TK. And that just took me straight back to my grandmother. Her name is Kiritapu, but going to school, she had to be Kitty because, no, I'm sorry, no one's going to pronounce your name like that. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be part of that, repeating a cycle where my daughter feels whakama for her own name. So that's been a massive driver too, like let's just get our babies home where they need to be loved and nurtured in their culture, their language.
And that's what you meant when we initially started this and you said you wanted to come home because, you know, I'm not allowed to say it, you did, but SHIT goes down, right? I mean, it's hey, a lot of us don't get to experience it the way that lifestyle, the way that that culture, the way that you do, particularly what's going down in that country at the moment, right? I can completely understand you wanting to come home. It's just, it seems like a lot of people still have that aspiration to be there, and you've experienced it. There is no other place really than home, right? I mean, that's the...
It's so true. I mean, yes, you know, Hollywood exists, and because it's a business, it's like a business hub. Yeah. Hardly any films get made in LA, by the way. Everyone's making stuff outside of that. It's just the business that exists there. So it kind of draws people because it's created its own entity. So you've got your agents there and everyone, like the whole acting scene and, you know, the business of film. And that's fine if that's where you want to go. But, you know, I met many struggling independent filmmakers because they don't have what we have here. We have a film commission that has money set aside that want to develop arts and culture. So we're lucky in that respect. They don't have that. If you want to make an independent film in that country, it's really difficult. You have to get, you are scrimping anywhere you can to try and get some funds or grants for this or grants for that. So it's actually really hard. You've either got to be in this massive kind of like, wow, Hollywood Marvel world, or you're in this very small, low independent niche filmmaking community. And I met some amazing independent filmmaking people, don't get me wrong, like incredible filmmakers, great storytellers. So it's very polarized, it's like one or the other. And you can be in that world, the whole Hollywood, Marvel, whatever, that kind of thing, fine. But there are also not many people in there that stay in there.
Oh, there's also costs and impacts and there's a price to that, right?
Massive price to that, yeah, there is, because it's just, I don't even really know how to describe it properly other than it's almost alien. It kind of is, because not many people get to make it and stay there, you know. So a lot of people are in this space, the small independent space. And a lot of good films are made there, but you might not get to see them because this is where all the money is. So all the money and resources go into these big things, and then we're fed what this kind of myth world of storytelling is. And we forget that there's all these other incredible stories to be told and that are being told. But because so much money is pumped into this, and this whole celebrity thing and da-da-da, we think that that's what it is. It can be a really lonely place to be honest. And so when I knew I could do this project back home, coming home, there's just been all these other things coming at me, but I think that's part of the intention as well. Like my intention to come home was to tell those positive stories that I really love, that I want to be a part of, that I want my kids to see and celebrate and see themselves on screen. Visibility, that is a huge thing too. I mean, look at Hollywood, they've only just decided to be diverse. Like what? I mean, you know, there's been some amazing research done that there's over 1 billion Indigenous people in the world. Like if that is not an audience to a distributor, to a sales agent, then come on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and we're really well placed. The other question I was going to ask you, and I'd love your perspective on this, is you're probably aware that there's a whole review going on around Māori content. And you've been in the belly of the beast, so you're probably more attuned to what the next trend or potentially what the next big wave will be and whether or not we're well placed or not. there are some apprehensions around our Māori media sector, right? And you may not have all the answers, but how do you think, what do we need to be doing? Where do we need to be going? What does our transition need to be to ensure not just film and television, online, all that kind of stuff, but even ensuring that we tell our stories well, particularly to ourselves, but also to a wider audience? What do you think has to occur to ensure that we still have a future for our content and our stories and our people?
Yep. Well, I think those powers that be, there's a table, right? And there's not many of us sitting at the table. There's not a true partnership.
Yeah.
So until we have true partnership at the table, decision makers, we're always going to be the poor cousin. And so we need to be visible at the top, and we need to be brave enough to tell our funders and those that hold the purse strings that, no, I'm sorry, it's not good enough anymore. We need to be right there making those decisions. And that's what true treaty partnership is about. Stop kind of putting us into this tiny wee little niche market over here because it's a percentage of the population rubbish. That's crap. No, 50-50 at the table, making decisions, because it's all about visibility. We've been fed this diet of what, the media, what we get fed all the time is really from a white perspective and a white male perspective. Well, hashtag time's up, me too, all of it. It's time to just put that whole kind of argument or whatever it's based on is just rubbish, because if we don't have visibility, it'll just be the same. It'll just carry on and on and on. So we need to be at the table, making those decisions, have the right amount of funding to give us the ability to have story sovereignty. Because you can't give us crumbs anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want the crumbs.
And given your, well, not unique, but your experience and your expertise, particularly talked about diversity, right? The world is wanting more of our content, the more of the stories about us now more than ever, right?
Look at all the films, for example, that have the most impact and do the most business, if you like, are films that are either made by Māori or have Māori content or celebrate our culture. They're not about necessarily Pākehā perspectives, because, I'm sorry, it's a bit boring. It's a bit bland and white and this is what's exciting. This is what makes us unique. Why do people come to this country? They don't come here to, well, I'm not going to say it. They come here to they come here because there's a unique perspective. There's a unique culture, a unique language. They can't get anywhere else in the world. They don't come here to see a version of themselves. Yeah. Otherwise they just stay back in London.
So how important then does your role become, not just in the project that you're looking to undertake, but also in terms of that continuation of the legacy of Merata, mentoring, bringing through particularly wahine Māori into the sector, into the industry, the next Chelsea Winstanleys?
It's super important, and there's so many of us doing that, and I'm so excited. The other kind of cool, really thing I'm excited about is reconnecting with Desiree Armstrong. So we started a little production company over 10 years ago, just treading water, not really sure what we were doing. And then since then we've both gone away respectively and grown ourselves in the industry, and now we're coming back together, and again it's so exciting to bring those skills back together that we have. But that's what we have to do, is absolutely open the doors to others. You've got to be brave enough and have enough courage for yourself so that you can bring others up with you. So that's a big part of it, capacity building for sure. And then just keep pushing, keep knocking. Well, maybe we don't have to knock at the door. Like Ava DuVernay is a massive role model for me, and what she's built. Her whole campus, her whole array campus, and that philosophy. That was one of the reasons why they picked up the film to distribute it, because Tulane Jones, who works with Ava, she watched the film and she said stuff that Merata was saying in that movie was exactly the same words that would come out of Ava's mouth, and she was just like, what? Two people from other sides of the world, but having the same philosophy. And Ava talks about, forget that, I'm not going to knock on the door anymore. I'm going to build my own goddamn house and open my own door. And she's done that. So it's also about, okay, this is the situation. If we are just sick of banging our heads against the brick wall, then okay, let's just build our own utopia. And then y'all can come and join us, And that's kind of how I feel like maybe we're going to get to, because you also have to, along with that, build the capacity of business now, you know, like Bailey Mackey and others that have kind of really got their global perspective and understanding of the business of media. That's really helpful stuff. So, you know, brothers like him who are building their business and bringing people up with them, you know, where we are right now doing this conversation here. There's so many incredible people doing wonderful things. Just keep bringing people up with you. Just keep bringing people up with you. Because the more we have, the stronger we are in numbers. You know, classic colonisation 101, divide and conquer. Yeah. There you go. Well, let's come back together and support one another. And also, look, we don't have to fight one another too. We've got skills that can complement each other. And so, again, like, let's not all fight for those little crumbs. And maybe having that division of Māori media has created a little bit of division sometimes, because then it puts just a little bit of money over there, and then also maintains this us and them thing. So it's a real safety zone for the mainstream to go, oh, well, there you go, you've got your little corner over there. It's like, nah, we don't need a little corner. Let's get back to just, you know, having an open book. Where are we all sitting on the spectrum? Because that doesn't sit well anymore, this whole us and them thing. We figured that out. Yeah. Like, you know.
Yeah. I love it. This is, I've just loved talking to you, actually. It's great to have you home, by the way.
No, it's great to have you home. I'm so happy being home. I'm so happy being home.
I think we need to do an episode 2.
Oh my God, we gas bag.
Yeah, you know, we gas bag for about an hour. Hey, thank you. It's awesome being able to talk to you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I think that there are so many messages in here that have been reflective of what other people have said, but having someone like you say them again reinforces them. Not only that, I think it emboldens, it strengthens others who watch this and think, okay, I think I know how to do this now, right? So thank you for that. Thank you for continuing to be an inspiration with so many others, not just Māori, wahine Māori, who want to be a part of this industry. I wish you all the best.
Tēnā.
Kia ora.